Shmos starts with the Parsha Shmos. Names. V'yele Shmos b'nai Yisrael, Abba Mitzrayim. These are the names of the B'nai Yisrael which come to Mitzrayim. Eis Yankov, with Yankov, Isha Beisei Bo. They came with their families. And names are an important thing. We Jews who are Maminim in the Torah, we don't ask what's to a name. We know that a name is the handle with which we grasp the neshama. The name is the name of the neshama. Whatever the neshama, before it came down to this world, was called in heaven, this is the name which it has over here. And the Chassid once asked the Chadosh Yarem what name he should name his child. And the Chadosh Yarem answered, the Ari HaKadosh says that when a father gives a name to a child, he does so with Ruach HaKodesh, with heavenly inspiration. He gives him the name which is actually the name which he was given upon descending into this world. So said the Chadosh Yarem, if I'm going to choose the name, why should I deprive you of a chance of having Ruach HaKodesh? So every name really means something. In the Sfarim we have the story that somebody once came to Reb Shlomo Radomski, a very great tzaddik in Poland, and he was asked by one of his townsmen, being that you're going to Radomski, the big tzaddik, please mention my name. I need a refuah. I'm sick and I need a healing. And it's customary that when you mention the name of a person to a tzaddik so that he should daven for you, you mention his name with his mother's name. So the tzaddik asks, what's his name? So he says, I forgot. I just can't recall the name. So he says, maybe his name is Yankov. Oh yeah, that's right, Rebbe, his name is Yankov. And what's his mother's name? I forgot. I can't recall the name. Maybe her name was Chana. Oh yes, Rebbe, her name was Chana. Rebbe, a virtual Ruach HaKodesh. How did the Rebbe know it was Ruach HaKodesh? So the Rebbe, who of course did have Ruach HaKodesh, said, this isn't Ruach HaKodesh. We have a Sefer Shmos, a Sefer, this Chumash, Shmos, names. And in this Sefer we have all the names of all the Jews. If I don't know the name, I just glance through the Sefer and I hit upon the name. He was capable of doing this because he learned Shmos the way Shmos is supposed to be learned. We are learning it very superficially and we can't find our names in the Sefer. But they're there nevertheless. So our Parsha and our Sefer which we are starting this week is the Sefer of Shmos. A name is the handle of the neshama. You can grasp somebody with a name. I've seen it in the hospital. The Sfarim talk about it. The Balatanya talks about it. But I've seen it in the hospital. A certain person, he wasn't conscious. He was... the doctors wanted to determine whether it's a real coma or a partial coma. So they started shouting his name to see if he's going to respond to the name. They didn't shove him. They didn't say, hey. They didn't say, how do you feel? They shouted his name because a person responds to his name, because he responds to his neshama. And therefore, every person, the Ri HaKadosh says, has two kinds of names. A name of Kedusha and a name of Tumah. And fortunate is he who calls himself and responds and acts according to the name of Kedusha. The B'nai Yissaschar says a very interesting pshat in this week's Sedra. I assume, whenever I speak to you on Thursday night, that you have learned the Sedra, and I hope my assumption has a good basis. So in this week's Sedra, there were the two midwives, and Parai wanted to kill the Jewish boys. And the king of Mitzrayim said to the two Jewish midwives, that one's name was Shifra, and one's name was Pua. And he said, in other words, he said that you should see to it that if you're going to see that a boy is being born, kill him. If a girl is going to be born, leave her, let her live. So the B'nai Yissaschar asks in his Sefer Agra Dekala, why does it say two times Vayayma? Vayayma Melech Mitzrayim Lamiyaldais Evreyais. The king of Mitzrayim said to the Jewish Miyaldais that one's name was Shifra and the second name was Pua. Vayaymer, and he said, again he said, we already know that he said. So why does it say again, Bi'alertanas Evreyas Risana Avanayim? So the Yissaschar explains this way. A Jewish, we know who these two Miyaldais were. We knew who these two midwives were. They were Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, and her daughter, Miriam, the sister of Moshe. That was, these were their real names. And what the king of Mitzrayim requested from these two virtuous women, from these two tzidkaniyos, what he requested from them was to murder Jewish children. Are they going to listen to him? Of course not. They'd rather have themselves be killed, like the halacha is, rather than murder somebody else. The king of Mitzrayim knew that they won't listen to them, that they won't listen to him. So he had a device. He's going to do something that will cause that they will obey him. And that is, he will not allow them to use their Jewish name anymore. They must be called with a Goyish name. once they're not called by the Jewish name, and whenever somebody's Jewish name is mentioned and he's called by that name, the very utterance of that name generates kedusha. It generates tahara, purity and holiness, and it reminds somebody why he came down upon this world. Because the name of every person is the name of his calling. Every person comes on in this world with this specific errand. He has to accomplish something in this world. And his accomplishment, his errand, you can find in his name, like by the Malachim. So he's going to cause them to be deprived of this source of Kedusha, of this injection of Tahara, which their name brings to them by dictating that they may not use their Jewish name. From now on, they should have Mitzri names. Once they're going to be called by the Mitzri names, which is a name of Tumah, so being called by that name will draw Tumah upon themselves. Once he accomplishes that, the barrier will be broken. They are going, good evening, they are going to fall prey to his commands, and they are going to murder Jewish children because they already opened the gate to the Satan, to the Yetzer Hara. Once, if there's a dike and there's a little crack in that dike, you don't need more. It's open already. So that's why you have 2 times Vayomer in the pasuk. There were 2 commands here. The first command was that they may not use the Jewish name and they have to substitute it with the Goyish name. The second command was that they should murder the Jewish children. So that's why we have 2 Vayomers. Vayomer Melech Mitzrayim Lamiaodais Evreyais, and the king of Mitzrayim said to the Jewish midwives, what did he say to them? You are no more Yocheved, you are no more Miriam. Asher Shema Achas Shifra v'Shema Sheinis Pua. One of you shall be called Shifra, and the other shall be called Pua. Mitzri names. And after that, he summoned them again, and he assumed that they listened to him, and that they now employ their Mitzri names. Vayomer, now he gave the second command, and he was sure that they are now under the spell of the Tumah now, because they're using the Goyish name. Vayomer, so he said, you shall kill the Jewish boys. So the pasuk says, the Mialdais, they feared God, and they disobeyed Parai on 2 counts. Firstly, they didn't do what the king of Mitzrayim told them, to use Goyish names. Secondly, they let the Jewish children alive. This is what the Bnei Yissaschar says. And very interestingly, the Chassam Sofer says the same pshat in his beer on the Chumash. The Gemara says in Brachas, Menolan Dishmagarim. How do I know that a name causes something? That the very name that a person has, that influences his actions, his behavior, and his character. How do I know that a name tells us something about a person. The Gemara tells a story there that Rabbi Meir, by hearing somebody's name, knew that he's a Rosh. His name was Kidaya, and Kidaya Tapuch is Haima. The name wasn't a very holy name. So he knew by the fact that he calls himself by this name that you have to beware of this person, and he was right. So the Gemara says, how do you know that a name means something? Because the pasuk says in Tehillim, L'chu chazu mifalais Elokim, go and see the workings of God, asher sam shamais ba'aretz, that he makes shamais in the land. Now the word shamais means destructions, shamais, disasters. That's the name, what shamais means. So the Gemara says, Al tekri shamais, don't read it shamais, tekri shamais, read it shamais, read it names. So there, from this pasuk we know that a name means something. You want to know the workings of God. You want to see the revelation of God. You want to see the actual appearance of God through His workings in this world. Come and see the workings of God. That He makes disasters in the world. And don't read it shamais. It's not disasters. It's shamais. It's names. This Gemara needs a biur, needs an explanation. If I'm going to say Tehillim and for the Amid, in the front of the congregation, and I'm going to read this pasuk, Asher Sam Shamais Ba'aretz, everybody will start yelling, Shamais, Shamais. I'm wrong, I didn't pronounce it correctly. We know Kabbalah that the correct pronunciation of this word is Shamais. So the Gemara says, don't read it Shamais, read it Shamais. Well, we're supposed to read it Shamais. So, and how does this pasuk tell us that a name implies something? Now, there are many things that make us wonder. When I translated this pasuk for you, Asher Sam Shamais Ba'aretz, it's go and see the workings of God that makes disasters in the land. However, the word Shamais can be translated in otherwise, in a different way. Shamais could mean wonders. Something that makes a person wonder, a deep wonder, like astoundings. Shamis means astoundings. Rashi brings it right in the beginning of Bereshis, that a person is shoymim, he's astounded about something. A person, like, let's say, the earthquake in Armenia. So when somebody would go and see it, he would be astounded. Wow! That means shamais, shemama, shaymim. And so we usually use the word shama, being astounded, wondering, where there is a shock together with this wonder when we see a disaster. So therefore, the two translations of Shemama and Shaymim, wonder and disaster, are related to each other. Now, there are things that make us wonder. We people, mortals, what do we understand? we're smaller. When we want to understand the doings of God in this world, we're stupider than a fly standing, let's say, at a launching pad of a spaceship as it's being launched, and the fly trying to explain how it works. We understand the workings of God, we understand what God does in this world, and people are haughty, they conceited, and they think they have to understand everything, and they explain things, and they write books about things, as if they understand. Imagine this fly writing a book about the spaceship. That's how it is with some people writing history and explaining things in history, or writing, let's say, science and explaining things in science. It's ridiculous. They can't understand. They can't really have the slightest notion of what is going on and why it's going on. So things happen. Imagine what happened in Mitzrayim if we would have been there some 3,000 years ago. And we are the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the children of the 12 holy Shvatim, and then arose a king, and he put us, he trampled upon us, and he put us into a condition of slavery and bondage. And then somebody would write a book, like people write books today, that God has left us, He has forsaken us, perhaps He has exchanged us for others, we lost our favor. Or maybe the whole story, Chas v'Shalom, is only a sort of a myth, it's a tradition, whatever, but they would have written, like they do today, a lot of nonsense about that. Because how could it be that the Torah, that Hashem, who so often and repeated His admiration and His love to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and He promised that their children are going to be the chosen children, how could they be treated this way by Paro and be so trampled and so oppressed? So they wrote, and they said, and they thought, whatever they did write and say and think, and they didn't know some facts which could have shed so much light on what's going on. The Zohar Kaddish explains us what happened in Mitzrayim, and I think we have mentioned it before. The people of Mitzrayim, the Jews in Mitzrayim, they were the same neshamas of the Dayel HaFlaga and the Dayel HaMabel. The generation of the Mabel, that they were wiped out in the great torrent of rain of the Mabel. They came again, they were reincarnated again in Mitzrayim. And also the Dayel HaFlaga, those who built that tower in Babylonia to go up and wage war against Hashem. So they had to come down again if they didn't suffer enough at their original sin, and they had to complete their punishment and their suffering for what they did. So they came down again. What was the Aveira by the Dayel HaFlaga? they built a large tower. They took clay and they made it into bricks, and that served them instead of stones, which was used in Eretz Yisrael for buildings, because in Bavel there are no stones. And that's how they built the tower. So this repeated itself because they built the tower with chayma and with levanim and with bricks. So the pasuk says, "Vayamaru es chayayim." The Mitzrim embittered their lives b'avayda kasha, with heavy work, b'chaymer u'b'levainim, with clay and with bricks. Because the original sin by the Dayah HaFlaga was with clay and with bricks. So therefore they had to suffer by toiling with clay and with bricks. And then there were others who were there from the Dayah HaMabel, from the Dayah of the deluge, when the whole world was covered with water, but apparently dying once wasn't enough of a punishment for the Aveirus which they repeated over and over again. So therefore these same people had to be thrown into the river. So therefore Kalabain in Mitzrayim we have Kalabain Hayiloid Hayayra Tashlichuhu, that Pari decreed that the Jewish boys that are born shall be thrown into the lake, into the Ayah. Now, because they were the neshamas of the Dayah HaMabel, so their punishment was similar with something like the Dayah HaMabel. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu also was by the Dayah HaMabel. Moshe Rabbeinu was there in the Dayah HaMabel. In the Dayah HaMabel he had a different name. His name was Noach. He was Moshe Rabbeinu. And there is a little criticism on him in the Dayah HaMabel. He wasn't mispalel for his generation. He didn't pray to God, please God, do something for these people, be the Michael, make them better, put into their hearts thoughts of tshuva. He wasn't mispalel enough. So the Gemara says in Chulin, Moshe menatayra minayin. Where do we know that Moshe? Where is Moshe hinted in the Torah? So the Gemara, where do we have a hint that there was Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah? So the Gemara says, it says b'shagam hu basal. By the Mabel, it says b'shagam. Hashem said, I will not tolerate what these people are doing now. B'shagam hu basal, because he is flesh. B'shagam is b'gematria 345, b'gematria Moshe. So the Gemara says, from here we see Moshe in the Torah. That's where Moshe is hinted in the Torah. Now this is a very peculiar piece of Gemara. We have hundreds of times that Moshe is mentioned in the Torah, and then the Gemara says, where do we find Moshe in the Torah? And the Gemara finds him someplace in the Gematria by Noach. What the Gemara means was, where did we find Moshe before Moshe? Where does Moshe come from? Who was he before? He was Noach. And he wasn't mispalel on the Dayah HaMabel. So therefore he's mentioned in the Parsha of Noach. And he had built a teva by Noach, and he was saved from the Mabel. And in our Sedra we have again that Moshe was put into a teva and he was saved from drowning in the water. The exact same word. He was Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is what the Isaiah HaKadosh tells us. And so that was Moshe. And when when the Jews sinned by the eagle, and they made a golden calf, and God wanted to liberate them, so Moshe Rabbeinu said, if you're going to forgive them, is good. Them ayin, and if not, mechayni na misifrecha asher kasafta. Erase me from your sefer which you wrote. Now, the Gemara tells us this that the Navi says, we find that in the Haftarah of Noach, that Hashem promised, Kimei Noach Zaisli. I promised, like I promised by the waters of Noach, that I will not wipe out, that I will remember Klal Yisrael, and they're going to be redeemed from the Galus. So the Gemara asks, why is it that the waters of Noach are attributed to Noach? Ki mei Noach Zaisli, the waters of Noach. It's not the Gemara, it's a Zohar. I was wrong. The waters of Noach. So, what do you want from Noach? These are waters of Noach. Noach wrote about these waters. So, yes, he did. Because he's somewhat responsible. He wasn't mispalel for them. He didn't daven for them. So they're called Mei Noach, the waters of Noach. Moshe Rabbeinu, he rectified that. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu again was born, and he was Moshe Rabbeinu, and he was drawn out of the water, or just like Noach was saved from the water in the Taiva, and Moshe Rabbeinu Vatasam Bataiva, and she put him into this Taiva. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Jews sinned, was mispalo for them, to the point of Mesiras Nefesh, to the point of saying, if you're not going to forgive them, Mechaini na misefrecha asher kasafta, erase me from your sefer. And he stuck his neck out for them. So it's very interesting, the Zohar tells us, that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he said Mechaini, if you rearrange the word Mechaini, you're going to have Mei Noach. Here he rectified the fact that the waters are called Mei Noach. They're attributed to Noach because he wasn't mispalel. Moshe was misaken that, he rectified that by saying Mechaini, and he rearranged the words Mei Noach into Mesiras Nefesh and being mispalel for the generation. So Moshe Rabbeinu, so just like Noach was saved from the Taiva, with the Taiva, Moshe Rabbeinu was saved, and very interestingly, the one who saved them, her name was Teva, who rearranged her name. Her name was Basya. Basya, the daughter of Paro. Everybody calls her Basya. I wonder why. In the Pasuk it says Bisya. But we're going to call her Basya, because everybody calls her Basya. So, there's reasons for everything. Now, we, being fortunate of knowing this Zohar, that the Tanoim of the Zohar have revealed the secret of the sufferings of the Jews in Mitzrayim, then we know why they suffered. Things become clear to us. There is a reason for it. Nothing happens, by itself. Nothing happens at random. Everything is directed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by Hashem Yisbarach. There's a reason why they suffered in Mitzrayim, because there is a cheshbon. There is an owed cheshbon, an owed debt which has to be paid. The generation of the Churban, of the destruction of the temple, of the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, our Chachamim tell us that they were the same generation of the Midbar who worshipped the Egel. And because they caused with their Aveira by the ego that there should be a Churban, so they came to be born again in the generation of the Churban, so that they should suffer the consequences of their Aveira, of the ego, of the Aveda Zara, which brought about to the Churban. We are a very unfortunate, perhaps, generation. Although I'm wrong in saying it, I may explain why I'm wrong, but while I'm going to say that we are an unfortunate generation, because today there are no people who reveal anything. Ruach HaKodesh doesn't exist today for all practical purposes, because we're in a generation of Anoichi Haster Aster Asfanai. The Rabbeinu Shalom said that at the end of the Galus, the Rabbeinu Shalom is going to hide himself. He's going to be concealed. We won't see him. We have always seen the Rabbeinu Shalom. If we didn't see him, like by the Har Sinai, panim b'panim, face to face, we saw him through Nevuah, we saw him through Nevi'im, we saw his hand in history and in the everyday affairs of man. But today, everything is concealed, everything is shrouded, we don't see anything today. Hastaras panim. And we were forewarned that that's how it's going to be. That the last generation, or a set of generations, before Mashiach comes, are going to go through a period where the Nisayon, where our test is going to be Emunah, to believe. So today we don't see those things. And we don't have any tzaddikim to explain things to us. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? But that's only a very recent change in our in our existence in the Galus. We always have tzaddikim, Bali Ruach HaKodesh. Our grandfathers were in contact with such people that knew things and explained things. In the years of Tach V'Tat, over some 300 years ago, there were great pogroms in Poland by Khmelnytsky, by a big Russia, who devastated Judaism and Torah in Poland. And you probably read, there are nice little storybooks about it, the story of the Shach and his daughter and all that, describing that period. So the tzaddikim said that who were those hundreds of thousands of Jews who were killed in the Gzeiros of Tach V'Tat? They were the Biryanim of the generation of the Churban, of the Second Temple. In the Gemara Gittin, we have the story of the Tzaddikim, the Prushim, the Tanoim, under Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who were opposed by the Biryanim. There were the Biryanim under a certain Shimon HaParetz that they wanted to fight and rebel against the Romans. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai held, no, we don't sacrifice Jewish lives just because we want to hold our country. We should surrender to the Romans, and it already has been decreed by the Rabbeinu Shalom. We know there's going to be a Churban. And the Gemara tells us the story, the way that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was carried out alive in a coffin so that he should be able to negotiate with the Roman general who later became the king. Anyway, there were the Biryanim who didn't want to accept the authority of the Chachamim, of the Rabbanim, and they wanted to conduct affairs and the politics of Klal Yisrael their way. We have a very similar situation today, but I won't go into this right now. Anyway, so they were the Biryanim, and they caused the destruction of the temple. Maybe the temple would have been destroyed anyway by the Romans, but they caused unnecessary bloodshed. They caused thousands and thousands of Jews should be killed in the wars in the future wars against the Romans. So these Birya, and the Gemara calls them Biryainim. Biryainim means I don't know how to translate it in English. I think I would call them the bums, the Biryainim, and the rascals, the Biryainim, and they were born again in the Gzeiros of Tachvetat, and they were all killed out. In fact, there were tzaddikim at that time. There were big rabbanim and tzaddikim, but they were the neshamas of the Biryainim, and they had to suffer for what they did in the generation, in the generation of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Everything has its reasons. Everything that happens could be explained, but unfortunately today there's nobody qualified to explain. However, we are more fortunate than them. We who believe in the Rabbeinu Shalom blindly, without understanding, our lot, our schus is very, very big. That without understanding, without being offered explanations for all these things, we still keep Shabbos, we still keep wear tefillin, we still keep kashrus, and we believe in the Rabbeinu Shalom, notwithstanding all these unexplained tragedies and troubles and whatever we're subjected to in our galus, and still we believe in the Rabbeinu Shalom. We're more chashiv, we're more endeared by the Rabbeinu Shalom, by the virtue of our emunah, of our pure, unquestioning faith, our emunah, which is the Nisayon, which is the test and the calling of this generation, to believe in the Rabbeinu Shalom. So, we, in our generation, I would say in my generation, because I already was a more or less mature boy when this happened, in our generation. So we saw a churb and a destruction which beats everything that ever happened before, the Holocaust. And there were smart Alex who, not enough that they didn't understand the Holocaust, decided to write books and give explanations about it. And one guy writes a book. I remember then that was a fad in those days, to write books about what happened, about the tragedy. One guy writes, "Is God dead?" Another one writes a book, "Why was he silent?" And such similar, and the articles in the newspapers and the magazines, and which stimulated conversation by parties and in the subways and all over. That's But Jews, the backbone of Klal Yisrael, believes in the Rabbeinu Shalom. There's nobody today to explain us why this happened in our generation. But a time will come when Mashiach will come. We will understand. We will know why it happened. We will know who these 6 million were and why they went through what they did go through. Everything has its reasons. We don't know. But we can't ask questions. We have to believe without understanding. When we see tragedy, when we see devastation, when we're astounded by shmos, by devastation, and we're wondering, why did it happen? We have to know that every person in this world came down for a reason. He has a calling, he has an errand, he has a certain mission in this world. And everybody has to accomplish and fulfill his mission. And fortunate is he who can come back me. Fortunate is he who can come back to the Rabbeinu Shalom and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, mission accomplished. I have accomplished what I came down for. The mission is in our names, but we don't understand the names. But everybody has a mission. The Rashi brings in Parshas Beshalach that when Yaakov Avinu asked the Malach, "What's your name? Mashmercha?" So the Malach said, "Lama zatishal lishmi? Why do you ask for my name?" So Rashi explains, our names always change according to our missions. Whatever we're sent for, that is the name that we have. A Jew has a name, and the name is the secret, it's the code of his mission, why he came down in this world. And those 6 million who came down, in their names, if we would be able to explain and decipher their names, we'd know why this and that happened to them. And when the Sefer Shmos begins, the Sefer starts telling us an altogether different story. Look what happened to Nimrod, to Stein, and the Meir, and the Daira Flag, and the Daira Mabel. This is what the Sefer Bereshis teaches us. Reward or punishment. When it comes to Shmos, it's altogether different. The Jewish people are oppressed. Their life is miserable. Why? Why did it happen? Why did so many Jewish children find their death in the Yam Suf? Why were they, like the Gemara tells us, why were they put into the cement? They were in the cement of the buildings of Pisam and Ramses. Why did it happen to them? Why did they suffer? So the answer is, you think that's in vain? You think they had no errand with this? You think nothing is being accomplished? You don't know that everything is bashgacha pratis with individual attention and hashemayim? They have a mission, they have shmos, they have names. So as soon as the Torah tells us about the tragedy which befell Klal Yisrael, that the Torah tells us that they had names and there's reasons for it, because they are the Dair HaFlaga and the Dair HaMabel, V'yele Shmos b'nei Yisrael. So the Gemara says, how do I know that Shema Garim, that a name means something? So the Pasuk says, V'chu u'le'u mifalei salakim, come and see the workings of God. The world doesn't function all by itself, There's somebody who's planning, and there's somebody who's conducting, and there's somebody at the controls. So these are mifalei salakim. Whatever you see, and you don't understand the mifalei salakim, asher sam shamais ba'aretz, the one who makes devastations in the land, the one who makes miseries and destructions in the land. And when you're going to ask a kasha, shamais, why is there devastation? And shamais, why am I wondering what happens? Do you know what the answer is? Al tikrei shamais, you can't read, you can't understand this devastation, ela shamais, only if you know the mission of the persons who undergo these tragedies. these people who are subjected to these shmos have shmos, and their shmos imply that they have to be subjected to these shmos. So Altikri shmos ala shmos. You can't understand the devastations unless you would understand the calling and the errands of these people and the missions of these people who are the victims of these tragedies. Everything has a reason. And when Mashiach will come, we're going to know the names. We're going to know the Shmos B'nai Yisrael. Now, 2 times we have the names of the 12 Shvatim mentioned when they came down to Mitzrayim, Pashas Vayigash. In fact, it's word for word. Ve'ele Shmos B'nai Yisrael haboim Mitzrayim. These are the names, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and you have that in Vayigash. And it's repeated again, Mamish, Rabbeinu, Ve'ele Shmos B'nai Yisrael haboim Mitzrayim. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Yasher, and so on. Why is it repeated again? We know the names already. We know who they are. But, as I said before, the name of a person gives us some insight into his mission and into his purpose of being created and existing in his particular period where he does exist and where he does function. That's his name. And so, supposing a certain person is called Shimon, and that Shimon is a tzaddik, and perhaps we'll find that he becomes a Kohen Gadol, Shimon a tzaddik, and he really is a Eved Hashem, a wonderful person, a perfect man, a righteous, wonderful, pious man, and his name is Shimon. So I would deduce that somebody who's called Shimon has to be a tzaddik, because that's the name of his errand. I mentioned before somebody else with the name of Shimon, Shimon HaPoretz. Shimon, the chief of the Biryainim, of those rascals who did not accept the authority of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he waged war and terror against the Romans and caused a lot of bloodshed. How could it be? Both of them were called Shimon. What does Shimon mean? Shimon is a good name or is a bad name? Here we have, I remember when I was a boy, my father, Olav Shalom, this week is his yahrzeit. I have very much to be thankful to him. One of the things which he didn't let me do was he'd never let me go to the movies. All the boys in my class went to the movies, and I never went to the movies. But I remember the boys used to come and tell us what they saw in the movies, and there were the good guys and the bad guys, shooting away at each other. And is Shimon, somebody's name who is Shimon, is he going to be from the good guys or the bad guys? We find that he can be from either. So how could it be if his name is Shimon? What does a name mean? However, in Lashon HaKodesh, which is the holy language, which is the language with which the Torah is written, there are very wonderful explanations and very wonderful arrangements of ICAs and shmos, and according to the arrangement, things change. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was, that we spoke about the 12 months, or maybe it was last week, that each month has one of the 12 tzirufim, one of the 12 arrangements of the Shem Havaya, of Hashem's name. There are 12 possible arrangements of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and each one of these 12 Chadashim has one of these tzirufim. I think, that was last week, and I told you that the tziruf of the Chodesh Teves is a Sefer Teves of Lad Hashem Iti U'Nereimem Hashmal. The klal is like this. Maybe at another time we're going to elaborate more upon this, but the klal is that in Kedusha, the Zachar is always first, and afterwards the Nekeva, the male and the female. And that's in Kedusha. In Tumah, it's the opposite. In the Zachar is supposed to be represented by the right side, and the Nekeva by the left side. The Zachar is Midas HaChesed, the Nekeva is Midas HaDin. And that's why we are told in the Shulchan Aruch that we must put on our right sleeve and then our left sleeve, our right shoe and then our left shoe, because we must give preference to the Midas HaChesed, the side of the Zachar, against the Midas HaDin. The Tumah does the opposite. And when it's depicted, let's say by the expression, this is known, ladies first. When somebody is going to is going to deliver a speech, he wants to become president or whatever, he'll say, ladies and gentlemen, because by the lady, by the Tumah, they'll put the ladies first. When they walk out of the door, the woman will go first, and then the man. This is the Gayish Minig, and I would say that in America, almost most Jews do it that way also. There are like many things that are wrong, but I'm not telling you that. I'm not prepared to tell you that. Next time you meet a shidduch or whatever, you should say, you should insist on going first. You might batch up things if you do, but that's how it is. And by Yankai first, it's the Gemara tells us, and Rashi brings it in Chumash first. It says that the Scharim and then the daughters, and by Esav it says it's Noshav. He has a lot of, first the women and then the Zecharim. So the Isias of the Aleph Beis are also divided in two groups: the Isias which are the Zecharim and the Isias which are the Nekeves. A Yud is a Zachar, so is a Vav. A Hey is a Nekeva. And therefore you will find by most words which are in the feminine tense, they're going to end with a Hey. The Chodesh Nisan is a pleasant Chodesh. The flowers are bloom in the spring. The Chodesh Nisan. Nisan the tziruf of the Shem Havaya of Nisan is Yismechu HaShemayim V'Sogei Al Ha'aretz, and the Rosh Tevis is Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the Yud before the Hey and the Vav before the Hey. The Zachar precedes, and then comes the Nekeva. I told you last week that the Chodesh Teves is a Chodesh of Midas Adin. That's Gadlu Lashem, which ends with a Hey, Iti, which ends with a Yud, Unareimema, again which ends with a Hey, and Shmai, which ends with a Vav, right? So you're going to see that the Hey is before the Yud and the Hey is before the Vav. And that's why it's a dark Chodesh. And that's why it's a cold Chodesh. It's cold. It's not a pleasant climate, because the Midas Hadin is dominant in this Chodesh, as opposed to Nisan, where the Yud is before the Hey and the Vav is before the Hey. And the time doesn't allow. It would be very interesting to go through all the 12 Chadashim and show how the tziruf of the combination of the Shem Havaya on the Chodesh is going to have its bearing on the climate. And the same thing you would have in Tammuz. Tammuz is the opposite of Teves. It's the fourth Chodesh. Tammuz is the fourth Chodesh after Nisan, just like Teves is the fourth Chodesh after Tishrei, in the groupings of the 6 and the 6. The tziruf of the Chodesh Tammuz is Hey Vav and Hey Yud. In fact, the Shem Havaya opposite. Also the Hey before the Vav and the Hey before the Yud. So it's the same Shem, the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, but being that the arrangements of the Isis are different, everything changes because of that. It can be the difference between Chesed and Din, between Binyan and Chorban, between Eir and Chayshach. Two people can have the name Shem, but the source is the Shem Havaya. Two people can have the name Shimon, but by Shemayim they know what the real arrangement is. Everyone has a different kind of an arrangement. Everybody has Bchira. Shimon HaTzadik could have been a Rasha if he would have chosen to be so. And Shimon HaParetz could have been a Tzadik if he would have chosen to be so. But whatever they would have chosen to be, they couldn't have changed the character. Shimon HaTzadik would have been the Chacham, the pious man, the Oved Hashem, and perhaps Shimon HaParetz could have been the general of the army under the guidance and under the authority of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. But he can't change his character. He can only change whether he's a tzaddik or a rasha, but not his very essence, not his very traits. So the same thing is with the Chadashim, and the same thing is with people. So names can sometimes, two people bearing the same name can sometimes be altogether different, even though they have the same name, because only those who have Ruach HaKodesh can really find out what the real combination of the name is. In Vayigash, the Jews, the Torah tells us that the Bnei Yisrael went down to Galus and have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. These are the names. And the names in Vayigash, each one of these 12 names implies that the Jews went down to Galus. The Sefer Shmos even though the first few parshas of Shmos speak about the Galus, but the Sefer Shmos in essence is the Sefer of Geula, of redemption. The Ramban calls it the Sefer HaGeula, the Sefer of redemption. And as soon as the Sefer Shmos begins, the Jews went down. Eile Shmos b'nei Yisrael bar Mitzrayim. We have an interesting medrash that all the names of the Shvatim are Kulam al Shem HaGeula, all about Geula. Reuven. Why is Reuven called Reuven? Because we're going to have in the parsha Roi Ra'isi es Ani Ami. I saw the plight, the suffering of my people. So Reuven means Ra'ai, the Rebbe saw. Shemain, hearing. Why is it called Shemain? Vayishma Elokim es Nakasam. The Rabban Shalom heard their prayers. Levi. Why is Levi called Levi? V'nilvu Gayim Rabba Marshem Hashem. There'll be many Gayim that will attach themselves, the Erev Rav, they'll add and to the Jewish hosts. Yehuda. Yehuda means thankfulness. Oitcha Hashem ki anaftabi. I'm going to thank you, Hashem. I'm going to realize everything was for my good. Yisascha. Yisascha's yesh sacha. You're going to have the reward lepulasech, and there was going to be a geula. The Rabban Shalom said to Rachel, Zvulun, Banai Benisi Beis Zvulach will build the Beis Hamikdash. Binyamin, Nish Bashem B'Yaminai. The Rebbe swore by his right hand. Binyamin means the right side. Dan, Gamas Agaya Shayavaidu Dan Anaychi. I'm going to punish those who oppressed you. Naphtali, Naifas, the Taifness of Sosayach. The voice, the prayers, the Torah of Klal Yisrael will be like honey to the Rabbeinu Shalom. God, Haman Gezra God, because they're going to have the man in the midbar, which was like the seed of God, a certain kind of a seed, the manna, the manna which he ate in the midbar. Asheya, ve'ishru eschem kol hagayim. All the nations are going to praise Klal Yisrael and envy them. Yosef, why is Yosef called Yosef? Yosef Hashem Sheinas Yadai. The Rabbeinu Shalom will again redeem Klal Yisrael. So the Madrash says on this pasuk, Eile Shmos b'nei Yisrael bar Mitzrayim, all these names are names of Geula, of redemption. So now we know why they're repeated again. It's not a repetition of what it says in the Vayigash. In Vayigash, they were altogether different names of Galus. In this Sedra, the names of Geula. It may be the same name, like Shimon and Shimon, but it means something altogether different. The arrangement is a different one. And our Parsha this week is already the Parsha when we bench Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and when good times are coming back again. And Geula is in the air. We can hear the shofar of Mashiach already. We can hear the song of B'tzais Yisrael Mitzrayim when we start laning the parsha of Shmos. So the names aren't the same names. So the Torah has to repeat the names because they're altogether different names now. These are names of Geula. When a child is born, if he's a Zachar, we'll give him a name by the bris. Why wait? Why not give him on Shabbos? Shabbos is a holy day. And why not utilize the Kedusha of the Shabbos to bring down the holy name on the child? Why should we wait for the 8th day, which can come out on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and give him the name then? But a bris is Yom HaShmini. Maybe I'll elaborate on that another time. It comes from Geula, the 8th day. When Mashiach will come, he's going to play on an 8th string, on a fiddle with 8 strings. There are 7 notes in music now. This is something which is going to be something you're going to perhaps be astounded to hear. when Mashiach will come, music will consist of 8 notes rather than 7 notes. And there will be a certain atmosphere of Geula comes down by every Beris, which is on the 8th day, and therefore Eliyahu Hanavi comes, because Eliyahu Hanavi is the herald of Mashiach. He ushers in Mashiach. So when by a Beris there's Geula, and therefore we utilize that moment of Geula to give the child a name that his name should be one of Geula, one of redemption, so that he shall be Zeicha to the Geula. So therefore, it's like a Bris Milah. So Eile Shmos B'nai Yisrael is speaking about Geula, and it's already like a Bris Milah. And you're going to notice that Eile Shmos B'nai Yisrael Ba Mitzrayim, so B'nai Yisrael Ba Mitzrayim ends, B'nai ends with a Yud, Yisrael ends with a Lamed, Abam ends with a Mem, and Mitzrayim ends with a Hey. And these are the Eisius Milah. We're giving names of Geula now, just like we do by a Milah. So these are altogether different names, and not the same names of Vayigash. And so when the Sedra Shmos comes, the Ramban tells us that we are starting the Sefer HaGeula, the Sefer of Redemption. We go through wonderful moments in the Sefer Shmos. We go through the Moshe Rabbeinu coming to redeem the Yidden, and there is the Esar Makos, and there is Yetzias Mitzrayim, and there is Kriyas Yamsuf, and the Man, and Matan Torah, and the crown jewel of all is Hashras HaShechina, that the Shechina dwells upon Klal Yisrael in the Mishkan, and the Sefer Shmos ends with the Mishkan being completed. And in fact, the last words of the Sefer Shmos, as the Ramban makes note of it, which is the climax of the attainments of Klal Yisrael in the Midbar. So the Klal Yisrael is Ki anan Hashem ala Mishkan Yaimam v'yishti Elai Lebai. The kavod, the glory of Hashem in the heavenly cloud is on the Mishkan by day, and fire at night, so that all the Jews should behold the glory of the Shechina G'daisha. And that's the Sefer Shmos. That's the purpose of the Geula. The purpose of the Geula is Hashras HaShechina, so that the Shechina shall dwell upon Klal Yisrael. So this is the Sefer Shmos. So when the Sefer Shmos becomes, there is a period of tshuva. No, there are certain periods of tshuva in the year, like the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. There's not a period of tshuva which is called Shevavim. The pasuk says, the Navi says, Shuvu banim Shevavim, return, you naughty children. Shevavim means naughty. You're naughty. It's like a mother would say, naughty boys, come, return, come back. Don't go with those bad boys. Come back to me. Shuvu banim Shevavim, return, you wild, naughty children. And Ari HaKadosh tells us that Shevavim, as the Navi calls it, is the Rashi Tevis. Shevavim is Shin Vav Beis Beis Yud Mem, which is Shmos Va'era Bei V'Shalach Yisrei Mishpatim. The first 6 sedras of the Sefer Shmos. And these first 6 sedras we have Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, And Matan Torah ends at the end of Mishpatim. So being that these are very momentous sedres where the Rabbeinu Shleilim takes Jews out of the Tumah. He takes them out of both physical and spiritual oppression. And he brings them to the end of Mishpatim, which is Matan Torah, which is Kvod Hashem. And that Matan Torah was substituted later with the Mishkan, this Hashras Hashchina. So therefore, in these 6 weeks, are a very opportune time to go back to the Rabbeinu Shalom and utilize the contents of these sedras, because as I mentioned last week, our Torah is alive. It isn't a story. Our Torah is alive. When we learn about Yetzias Mitzrayim, we go out of Mitzrayim. We go out of Meitzar Yam. We go out of Min HaMeitzar Karasi Ka'anani V'Marchavia. We go out of the oppression into relief. So our neshamas also are relieved in these 6 weeks from the oppression of the Yetzer Hara of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim has the word Yetzarim in it, and we come to the Torah, to Matan Torah. So these are 6 weeks of tshuva. So these Sfarim tell us what we should do in these 6 weeks, and in times, let's say, our great-grandfathers used to fast in these 6 weeks. Some of them fasted once a week, some of them fasted the entire week, and they were mispalei when they said Tehillim. And like the B'nai Sasra says in this week's Seder, that when Shmos comes is the time to do tshuva and say Tehillim, because Shmos B'nai Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayim is a Sefer Tevis, is the Sefer Tevis Tehillim. You have the word Tehillim here. And it's a time of doing tshuva. We can't do these things. We are too weak for it. We can't tolerate self-inflicted punishment. We're tormented enough with whatever went over Klal Yisrael already. However, that doesn't mean that we have to be altogether indifferent to the very purpose and the character of these 6 weeks of tshuva. They are times of tshuva, times of returning to the Rabbeinu Shalom, times of hearing the voice in our heart that the Rabbeinu Shalom calls to us through the Navi, and he appeals to us, and he beseeches us, please, my darling children, shuvu banim shevavim, naughty children, won't you come back to me? Utilize the stories of Yetzias Mitzrayim, because they're not stories, they're experiences. When we learn about Yetzias Mitzrayim, we rise above the limitations of time, and we find ourselves together with Moshe Rabbeinu, who redeems us from Mitzrayim. And when we read about Matan Torah, we hear the Kairos Barakim of Matan Torah, we hear the sounds of the Torah being given, like Tzaddikim actually heard it when it was read on Shavuos or on Parshas Yisrael. So we should utilize this time. The 6 sedras of Shevavim, like in our Shavuot and Amunas Yisrael, we instituted that every Friday of these 6 weeks we get up a half hour earlier, and a half hour before Shachris we say Tehillim. Like the B'nai Sasra's Maramis in the first pasuk of. Now, I will not advocate any fasting or anything of this kind, but at least be aware that there's a certain season now, a season of tshuva. Utilize it. Learn the sedras. Study shmos and Ve'era and Boy and B'Shalach and Yisrael and Mishpatim. Live along, experience Yitzias Mitzrayim, experience every makkah that came upon the Mitzrayim, which means a refuah for the Yisrael, as we are going in Yes Hashem to. I hope I'll be zeicher to elaborate more about that, if I'll be zeicher, and experience it. Now, at this point, I will have to tell you that. Can you put the tape off?